You are in Philadelphia, in the summer of 1776. But this is not the city of celebration you have read about. This is a crucible. The air itself is a physical weight, thick with humidity that clings to your woolen coat, the scent of the Schuylkill River, and something else, a palpable, shimmering tension. It radiates from the brick walls of the State House, a low hum of anxiety and indecision that the drone of horseflies in the street cannot drown out. Inside that hall, men are deciding the fate of a continent, and the world is holding its breath, even if it does not know it yet. Step into the chamber. The windows are thrown open, but no breeze stirs. You see the faces, flushed and beaded with sweat. These are not icons cast in bronze. They are mortal men, trapped between a fearsome king and a fearsome, unknown future. You see John Adams of Massachusetts, his face a thundercloud, pacing near the back. His voice, you have heard for weeks, has been a constant, driving force for the final, irrevocable break. He speaks of liberty in absolute terms, as a birthright bestowed by God, not a privilege granted by a distant parliament. To him, the matter is simple, righteous, and clear. To hesitate is to be damned. But then you see John Dickinson of Pennsylvania. He is the counterweight. He sits, calm and composed, his arguments delivered not with fire, but with the chilling precision of a lawyer. He does not speak of treason, but of history. He reminds the delegates that they are Englishmen. Their rights, the very rights they seek to defend, are the inheritance of the Magna Carta, of the Glorious Revolution. To sever the tie with the crown, he argues, is not to secure those rights, but to cast them into the abyss, to trade the known, if flawed, protection of British law for the chaos of mob rule and the certainty of a devastating war. You feel the power of his argument. It is an appeal to caution, to order, to the fear of the unknown that lurks in every man's heart. And there, quiet, is Thomas Jefferson. The Virginian is no great orator. He watches as his words, the elegant and soaring phrases of the document he so painstakingly drafted, are debated, dissected, and by some dismissed. His declaration is more than a legal argument. It is a piece of political poetry, a statement of universal human aspiration. It speaks of self-evident truths and unalienable rights. For Adams and his allies, it is the moral foundation for a new world. For Dickinson and the moderates, it is a beautiful but fatally radical provocation. It is a line from which there can be no retreat. The debate has raged for days. The news from the north hangs over every word spoken. General Howe's fleet has been spotted off New York, a forest of masts, an unimaginable concentration of military power. General Washington's army, the nascent continental force, is a fragile thing of militia and hope, ill-equipped and untested against the full might of the British Empire. You hear the whispers in the corners of the room. A delegate from South Carolina worries that a declaration of independence will incite a slave rebellion, funded and armed by the crown. A merchant from New York calculates the cost of having his city, the hub of his trade, occupied and perhaps burned. These are not abstract fears. They are immediate, tangible, and terrifying. The momentum begins to shift. It is not a sudden reversal, but a slow, weary grinding down of revolutionary fervor. The delegates from the middle colonies, Pennsylvania, and New York chief among them, begin to lean toward Dickinson. They are not cowards. They are men with everything to lose: land, businesses, social standing, and their very lives. The fiery rhetoric of independence that sounded so stirring in pamphlets and taverns now sounds like a funeral dirge in the face of British cannons. Dickinson sees his moment. He rises, not to offer another rebuttal, but to propose a different path, a third way. He speaks of a final appeal to the king, not as grovelling subjects, but as aggrieved and loyal Englishmen demanding their due. "Let us not," he implores, his voice resonating in the humid air, "close the door to reconciliation. Let us not mistake rashness for courage." He proposes that Jefferson's document be set aside. In its place, the Congress should draft a new appeal, a petition of American grievances, which will list every violation of their rights, every tax imposed without consent, every statute they find intolerable. But it will do so within the framework of the Imperial Constitution. It will be an ultimatum, but an ultimatum that offers a path back from the brink. It will demand reform, not revolution. You can feel the room change. The tension does not break, but it transforms. The terrible, paralyzing weight of an absolute choice, liberty or death, is lifted. Dickinson has offered a reprieve, a chance. Adams is on his feet, his face purple with rage. He calls it cowardice, a delusion, a betrayal of all they have fought and bled for thus far. But his voice is now the outlier. The exhausted, frightened majority is no longer listening to the prophet of a new nation. They are listening to the pragmatist, who offers them a chance to save their own. The vote is called. It is not for independence. It is a procedural vote on whether to consider Dickinson's proposal to shelve the declaration in favour of the petition. You see hands go up. Slowly, deliberately. New England is a wall of defiance. Virginia is split. But Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, Delaware, they vote for the moderate path. The motion carries. A quiet descends upon the chamber. It is the sound of a future being unwritten. Thomas Jefferson sits motionless, his manuscript now a relic of a dream that has passed. John Adams turns and stares out the window, his jaw clenched so tight it must ache. There is no triumph on the faces of the victors, only a profound and sombre sense of consequence. John Dickinson himself looks burdened, as if he has just single-handedly shouldered the weight of peace. The Second Continental Congress has made its choice. The Quill, poised to sign a declaration of birth, has hesitated. The members will not pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honour to a new nation. Instead, they will pledge their loyalty to a last, desperate attempt at mending the old one. They have stepped back from the edge of the world, choosing the familiar tyranny of a king over the terrifying freedom of a republic. The great divergence has begun, not with a bang, but with a weary, pragmatic, and fateful whisper. You walk through a world 4 years older. It is 1780. The seasons have turned, but the war has ground on, a slow, ugly, and inconclusive affair. The grand, decisive battles that both sides had once imagined never materialized. Instead, it has been a war of skirmishes, of weary occupations, and brutal raids along 1,000 miles of frontier. The initial rejection of independence in Philadelphia did not end the fighting, it simply changed its character. The conflict lost its soul. It is no longer a glorious revolution, but a bitter, protracted, and bloody negotiation. You see General George Washington at his winter quarters in Morristown. His face is etched with a weariness that goes beyond the physical. His army is a phantom of its former self. Without the unifying cry of independence to rally men to the cause, enlistments have dwindled. Militia units serve their time and simply go home. The fire of 1776 has cooled to a sullen ember. Washington's forces are now an army of holdouts, of true believers and desperate men with nowhere else to go. They fight not for a new nation, but to maintain just enough leverage, just enough of a threat, to force London to take the Continental Congress's petitions seriously. It is a miserable and thankless task. Across the Atlantic, in London, you find a parliament equally weary of the conflict. The war is expensive. It disrupts the colonial trade that fills the coffers of British merchants. Lord North's government faces growing pressure from a mercantile class that wants the American colonies pacified and producing raw materials again, not burning as a line item in the royal budget. The news of a minor victory at Camden or a skirmish won in the Hudson Valley does little to quell the demand for a final resolution. The appetite for a punishing war to crush the colonists is gone, replaced by a pragmatic desire for a profitable peace. It is in this climate of mutual exhaustion that the Carlisle Commission arrives. This is not the first peace commission, but it is the most serious. Led by the Earl of Carlisle, these are not just messengers. They are plenipotentiaries with the full authority of the king to negotiate a lasting settlement. They do not land in New York as conquerors. They arrive in Philadelphia, the seat of the Congress, as diplomats. Their proposal, which becomes known as the Carlisle Commission Accords, is a masterpiece of imperial statecraft. You are there in the chamber as the terms are read aloud. They are astonishingly generous, far more so than anything offered before. They grant almost everything the colonists had demanded in the years leading up to 1776. Parliament's right to tax the colonies directly is to be renounced forever. The intolerable acts are to be repealed. The colonies will be granted representation in the British Parliament, a handful of seats, more symbolic than powerful, but a monumental concession nonetheless. In exchange, the colonies must reaffirm their loyalty to the Crown, disband the Continental Army, and accept the permanent stationing of British garrisons in major ports. You watch the faces of the delegates. The same men who debated independence 4 years ago now debate this offer of peace. John Dickinson, his position vindicated by the long, fruitless war, argues passionately for acceptance. He paints a picture of a golden future, a North America, secure in its rights as Englishmen, a partner in the world's greatest empire, prosperous and at peace. He reminds them of the depleted treasury, the mutinous whispers in the army, the ruin of their coastal cities. What more can we hope to gain with the sword? He asks. That is not offered to us now on the olive branch? John Adams is there, a spectre of his former self. He rises to object, but his voice lacks its old fire. He warns that this is a gilded cage, that the promises of a distant parliament can be unmade as easily as they are made. He speaks of the men who have died, of the blood shed at Bunker Hill and Saratoga. Was it all for a handful of seats in Westminster? But his arguments sound hollow now, like echoes from another time. The delegates are no longer dreaming of a new world. They are desperate to salvage what is left of the old one. The final push for acceptance comes from an unexpected quarter. A delegation of Southern planters, led by Henry Laurens of South Carolina, speaks of their greatest fear, slavery. The British have been offering freedom to any slave who flees a rebel master and joins the Royalist cause. Thousands have done so. The Southerners see this as an existential threat to their entire social and economic order. The Carlisle Accords offer a crucial guarantee. All property rights, including property in slaves, will be respected and restored to their pre-war status. For the Southern delegates, this is the deciding factor. Securing their slave society within the protective legal framework of the British Empire becomes more important than the abstract ideal of independence. The vote is held. This time, it is decisive. The Carlisle Commission Accords are accepted. A treaty is signed. The war, the American rebellion, is over. You see the aftermath. Church bells ring in Philadelphia and Boston, not for independence, but for peace. Continental soldiers, given their back pay in freshly printed sterling notes provided by the Commission, lay down their muskets and begin the long walk home. Some are relieved. Many are bitter, feeling a profound sense of betrayal. They fought for something more, for a cause that has been bargained away. George Washington formally resigns his commission, not to a new American government, but to the representatives of the Continental Congress, before retiring to his estate at Mount Vernon, a private citizen of a restored British colony once more. He is a respected figure, but a failed revolutionary. His legend will be that of the man who fought the empire to a draw, not the father of a new nation. Loyalists who had fled to Canada or England begin to return, cautiously reclaiming their property. The process of reintegration begins. The radical dream of a republic, born in the heat of 1776 and defended in the field for 4 bloody years, dies quietly in a negotiated settlement. The continent has been brought back into the imperial fold. The great divergence widens, carving a new channel for the river of history. The year is 1788. The dust of the rebellion has settled, but the air is thick with the scent of wet ink and political construction. Peace, you have learned, is not an end point. It is the beginning of a far more complex and arduous task. The Carlisle Accords were a promise, a sketch of a new relationship. Now, that relationship must be given flesh and bone, a constitutional skeleton to support the restored body of the British Americas. For 8 years, a grand convention of colonial leaders and British commissioners has laboured in Philadelphia, the same city that once flirted with revolution, to build this new structure. The result is a document known as the Articles of Dominion. It is not a declaration of independence, but its opposite, a declaration of permanent, structured dependence. It is a work of immense legal and political ingenuity, a testament to the power of compromise and the enduring allure of empire. It formally abolishes the old, chaotic system of 13 separate colonial charters and unites them into a single, cohesive entity, the Dominion of North America. You are present in the newly refurbished Congress Hall as the Lord Governor General, a British aristocrat appointed by the King, reads the preamble of the Articles to the assembled colonial delegates. The very architecture of the room tells the story. The colonial flags hang on one wall, but opposite them, larger and more prominent, is the Grand Union flag of the British Empire. A portrait of King George III, looking regal and benevolent, hangs above the Speaker's dais. The Articles create a 2-tiered system of government. A continental parliament, the Dominion Parliament, will sit in Philadelphia. It will be composed of representatives elected by the property-owning men of the various provinces, the new, less romantic term for the former colonies. This parliament will have authority over all internal matters: local taxation for roads and canals, westward expansion into newly acquired territories, under Crown supervision, of course, and the regulation of commerce between the provinces. It gives the Americans what many of them always wanted: the right to manage their own local affairs without the constant, nagging interference from London. But the second tier of power is absolute. The Dominion and its Parliament are explicitly subordinate to the Crown and the British Parliament in Westminster. All matters of foreign policy, international trade, and military command remain the exclusive purview of London. The Governor-General holds the power of veto over any law passed by the Dominion Parliament, a steel gauntlet within the velvet glove of colonial autonomy. The Royal Navy protects the Dominion's coasts, and British regulars garrison its forts. North America is a partner in the empire, but it is, and will always be, a junior partner. You observe the men who are shaping this new reality. John Dickinson is a celebrated elder statesman, the father of the Dominion. His vision of a self-governing America within the empire has become reality. He is lauded as the man who saved the continent from the chaos of republicanism. Figures like Alexander Hamilton of New York and Robert Morris of Pennsylvania thrive in this new environment. Ambitious, pragmatic, and with a deep respect for British institutions of finance and law, they become the primary architects of the Dominion's economic system. They work to establish a continental bank, modelled on the Bank of England, and to align the Dominion's currency and trade policies with those of the wider empire. They are building a system designed for seamless, profitable integration. But you also see the shadows, the men who have been left behind by this new order. Samuel Adams has returned to Massachusetts, a bitter and politically irrelevant figure, his revolutionary rhetoric now sounding like treason to a new generation focused on prosperity. Thomas Jefferson has accepted a diplomatic posting to Paris, a quiet and respectable exile. He writes long, philosophical letters that are privately admired, but publicly ignored. His ideas of agrarian democracy and the empire of liberty have no place in this world of centralized imperial control. These men are the ghosts at the feast, reminders of a different path that was decisively rejected. The most profound and immediate consequence of the new Dominion is the end of the westward dream as the colonists knew it. The Crown takes direct control over the vast territories west of the Appalachians, the same lands that had been promised to the colonists in their old charters. The Dominion Parliament is explicitly forbidden from issuing grants or charters for trans-Appalachian settlement. London, guided by a desire to avoid costly wars with native tribes and to manage the lucrative fur trade, intends to keep this region as a massive, protected Indian reserve. The Appalachian Wall becomes a hard political and military reality. This decision creates a new source of tension. You see the frustration on the faces of Virginia land speculators and the anger in the eyes of Scots, Irish farmers on the frontier, who see the mountains not as a border, but as a gateway. For them, the Dominion is not a protector of their rights, but a cage, locking them out of a continent of land they believe is their birthright. A new political fault line is drawn, not between colonist and king, but between the settled, commercially minded eastern seaboard that benefits from imperial trade and a restless, land-hungry frontier that chafes under imperial restraint. This is a problem deferred, a seed of future conflict planted in the very foundation of the new Dominion. As 1788 draws to a close, the Articles of Dominion are formally ratified. The Dominion of North America is born. It is stable, it is orderly, and for the merchants of Boston and the planters of Carolina, it is profitable. It is a grand monument to the failure of revolution, a testament to the enduring power of monarchy and empire. It has brought peace, but it is the peace of a gilded cage, whose bars are only just beginning to be felt. The divergence is now an immense, unbridgeable chasm. You cross the Atlantic, leaving the newly ordered world of the American Dominion behind. The year is 1789, a date that in another history would be a flashpoint, the beginning of a fire that would consume a continent. But here, in the Paris of this timeline, the air is different. There is discontent, yes. The price of bread is high, and the pamphlets in the Palais Royal still decry the extravagance of the court, but the rage lacks its razor edge. The atmosphere is one of tense negotiation, not of imminent, violent rupture. You see the Palace of Versailles, not as a gilded cage about to be stormed, but as the center of a slow, cautious, and surprisingly successful political reformation. King Louis XVI is here. He is not the tragic, indecisive figure doomed to the guillotine. He is a monarch who has been granted the most precious of all political gifts: time and money. The great divergence in America becomes the great salvation for the French monarchy. Without the American Revolutionary War, the French treasury is not broken. There are no crippling loans to repay, no financial black hole that forces the king into a desperate, last-ditch confrontation with the nobility and the Third Estate. The 7 years of peace, when in another world France would have been pouring its wealth into the American cause, have been 7 years of quiet, fiscal consolidation. You observe the king's chief minister of finance, Jacques Necker. In our history, his reforms were too little, too late, his efforts swamped by the tide of an unpayable national debt. Here, he is a resounding success. With the state's finances strained but not shattered, Necker has the political capital to maneuver. He implements a series of crucial reforms that would have been unthinkable in a bankrupt nation. A land tax, long demanded by the commoners, is levied upon the Second Estate, the nobility. It is a bitter pill for them to swallow, but without the imminent threat of state collapse, they cannot rally the nation against the king. They grumble and protest in their country estates, but they pay. The most hated of the domestic taxes, the gabelle on salt, is abolished. This single act does more to quell popular unrest than any speech or philosophical treatise. It is a tangible, direct benefit to every peasant, every shopkeeper, every family in France. The king, once derided as a distant autocrat, is now hailed in the streets of Paris as Louis the Restorer. The Estates General is still convened in 1789, for the pressure for political reform has not vanished entirely. But its character is fundamentally different. It is not a body meeting on the edge of an abyss. You are in the hall as the delegates meet. The members of the Third Estate are still passionate, still quoting Rousseau and demanding a greater voice. But their demands are for a constitutional monarchy, for a written charter of rights modelled not on a radical American republic that never was, but on the British system of a sovereign king in Parliament. Their model for the future is the very system that John Dickinson and the American moderates chose to remain a part of. The failure of the American Rebellion has had a profound ideological impact. Republicanism is no longer seen as the inevitable, glorious future. It is seen as a dangerous, bloody path that leads to ruin and, ultimately, failure. The French reformers who might have once dreamed of a republic now argue for a reformed, modern monarchy. The idea of revolution, of a complete overthrow of the existing order, has been discredited by its primary test case. As bedrock truth dictates, political change now seems most plausible through gradual reform, not violent schism. You watch as the king, guided by his ministers, makes a series of masterful concessions. He agrees in principle to the creation of a permanent National Assembly, which will have the power to approve all new taxes. He consents to the drafting of a Charter of French Liberties. He does not fight the rising tide of reform. He channels it, guides it, and in doing so, preserves his throne and the entire edifice of the Bourbon dynasty. There is no storming of the Bastille. The fortress prison remains a grim but largely ignored part of the Parisian skyline. There is no great fear that sweeps the countryside. There is no radical Jacobin club baying for blood. The names that would echo through a revolutionary history, Robespierre, Danton, Marat, remain in obscurity. Robespierre is a provincial lawyer known for his eloquent but unremarkable legal arguments. Danton is a boisterous but minor political figure in his local district. Marat is a failed physician who writes angry, unread pamphlets. their historical moment never arrives. By the end of the year, France is on a new path. It is transforming from an absolute monarchy into a constitutional one. The process is fraught with difficulty and compromise, but it occurs without mass violence, without a reign of terror, and without the execution of the king. The French monarchy and the broader European dynastic order has weathered the storm. It has bent, but it has not broken. The great engine of social and political chaos that was the French Revolution has been dismantled before it could ever be built. The entire political and ideological landscape of the 19th century will now be unrecognizably different. Europe will continue to be a continent of kings, not of nations born from revolutionary fire. You return to the North American continent. The calendar has turned to the 1790s. The new dominion is settling into its existence, a decade of uneasy peace and burgeoning prosperity. In the coastal cities, Philadelphia, New York, Charleston, a new Anglo-American identity is taking shape. Merchants grow rich from the protected trade routes of the British Empire, their ships carrying Dominion timber and grain to the West Indies, and returning with sugar and rum, all under the watchful eye of the Royal Navy. A generation is coming of age that has no memory of the rebellion. They are Dominion men, subjects of the king, and they see their future intertwined with the fortunes of London. But you leave the cobblestone streets and the bustling harbours behind. You travel west into the backcountry of Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the Carolinas. Here, the mood is entirely different. You are moving toward the Great Barrier that defines the western limit of this civilization, the Appalachian mountain range. In this timeline, these mountains are more than a geological feature. They are a wall. The Royal Proclamation of 1763, which in our history was a flimsy, often ignored line on a map, is now the ironclad law of the Dominion, enforced with the full might of the British military. The Articles of Dominion explicitly affirmed the Crown's sole authority over the Ohio Valley and the lands beyond. This is not a suggestion. It is a command. You see the physical evidence of this policy. Forts that were once small trading outposts are now proper military garrisons, staffed not by colonial militia, but by British regulars in their iconic red coats. Fort Pitt, at the forks of the Ohio, is a formidable bastion, a clear and unambiguous symbol of imperial power. You ride along the proclamation line. It is a zone of simmering low-grade conflict. You see Dominion surveyors, escorted by soldiers, formally marking the boundary. On the other side, you see delegations of Shawnee, Delaware, and Iroquois leaders meeting with British agents. For the native tribes, this new arrangement is a godsend. The Crown, eager to avoid the massive expense of frontier wars, and to protect the hugely profitable fur trade from the encroachment of settlers, has become their most powerful ally. British agents deliver muskets, tools, and blankets, not as prelude to conquest, but as payments for alliances. The Ohio Valley is to be preserved as a vast Indian reserve, a client state of the British Empire, a buffer between the populous East and the Spanish territories beyond the Mississippi. You sit in a tavern on the Virginia frontier. The men here do not speak of imperial trade balances or parliamentary representation. They speak of land. They are veterans of the late rebellion, men who were promised bounties of western land for their service, promises that the new Dominion government cannot honour. They are second and third sons with no inheritance to look forward to. They are new immigrants from Scotland and Ireland, drawn across the ocean by the promise of a farm of their own. They look west at the rolling, fertile hills of the Ohio country, a land they see as empty, a wilderness waiting to be tamed, a destiny that is being denied to them. Their anger is not directed at a distant king. It is directed at the red-coated soldiers who patrol the mountain passes and at the wealthy Eastern merchants in Philadelphia who seem content with the arrangement. A new, bitter sectionalism is born. The frontiersman sees the Easterner as a soft, corrupt collaborator, happy to trade away the continent's future for a comfortable profit in the Atlantic trade. The Easterner sees the frontiersman as a dangerous, lawless agitator, a threat to the peace and stability that the Dominion was created to ensure. This tension occasionally explodes into violence. You witness an event that becomes known as the Cumberland Gap Incident. A party of several dozen families, calling themselves the Trans-Appalachian Pioneers, attempts to cross the mountains in defiance of the law. They are met not by native warriors, but by a company of British light infantry. The confrontation is tense. The pioneers are armed and defiant. The British officer gives the order to disperse. A shot is fired. No one is sure by whom, and the encounter turns into a short, brutal firefight. The pioneers are driven back, leaving several dead. The incident becomes a cause célèbre. In the East, it is condemned as a foolish and criminal act of rebellion against the Crown's legitimate authority. In the West, the dead pioneers are hailed as martyrs, murdered by foreign soldiers for the crime of seeking a better life. Illegal squatters continue to slip across the border, creating small, hidden homesteads in the forests of Ohio and Kentucky, living in constant fear of discovery by either a British patrol or a native war party. The Appalachian Wall holds, but the pressure against it is building. It is a fundamental conflict of visions. The British Empire sees North America as a valuable, settled coastal territory and a resource-rich interior to be managed for profit. The people of the frontier, however, have inherited a different idea, a folk memory of manifest destiny that has nowhere to go. They are trapped. The great safety valve of American history, the endless supply of Western land that diffused social and economic pressures, has been sealed shut. That pressure will not simply vanish. It is building deep within the foundations of the Dominion, seeking a crack, an outlet, a future explosion. You leave the simmering tensions of the American frontier and return to Europe. The continent is in a state of dynastic calm, but it is not a world without conflict. The old rivalries between the great houses Bourbon, Habsburg, Romanov continue to drive the continent's politics. Kings still seek glory, and armies still march. It is within this familiar, pre-revolutionary framework of European power politics that a familiar name makes his entrance onto the world stage, in a role you would never expect. The year is 1804. His name is Napoleon Bonaparte. You see him not in the imperial purple of an emperor, but in the crisp blue and white uniform of a general of the Royal French Army. He is 35 years old, his youthful thinness replaced by a compact, powerful build. The same burning ambition, the same piercing intellect is there in his eyes. But his career, his entire life, has been shaped by the stable, monarchical world he was born into. Without the French Revolution, there was no whiff of grape shot, no meteoric rise through the ranks of a chaotic Republican army. Bonaparte's advancement has been slower, more conventional, but no less brilliant. He is a master of artillery, a subject he has studied with an almost religious devotion. His innovative tactics and logistical genius earned him notice in the minor border conflicts of the 1790s. He is a man of immense talent, and in the structured world of the French Royal Army, talent is still a path to promotion, albeit a more regimented one. He is not a political figure. He is the king's most effective and ruthless servant. The great conflict of this era is not a continent-spanning ideological war, but a classic dynastic struggle. France, under the reformist but still ambitious King Louis, seeks to expand its influence in Italy. This brings it into direct conflict with its ancient rival, the Austrian Habsburg Empire. War is declared. It is a war of professional armies, of kings and their generals, fought for territory and prestige. You are on a dusty plain in northern Italy, near the town of Marengo. The French army is in a perilous position. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered by a superior Austrian force, it is on the verge of collapse. A retreat is already beginning, the first signs of a rout appearing in the ranks. But then you see him. General Bonaparte, at the head of a small reserve force, rides onto the field. What happens next is not a scene from a romantic painting, but a display of ice-cold mathematical and logistical genius. Bonaparte seems to see the entire battlefield as a single, complex equation. He sees the enemy's weaknesses, the precise angle for his cannons, the exact moment to commit his cavalry. In a series of lightning-fast maneuvers that leave the methodical Austrian commanders baffled, he completely reverses the course of the battle. His artillery shatters the Austrian centre, and a perfectly timed cavalry charge, led by the dashing Joachim Murat, turns their flank. What should have been a decisive French defeat becomes, in the space of a few hours, a shattering victory. The news of the Battle of Marengo electrifies Paris. Bonaparte is hailed as the saviour of the army, the hero of the nation. King Louis XVI, now an old man, summons the young general to the Palace of Versailles. You witness the scene. The aging monarch, a symbol of the enduring old order, bestowing the highest military honour, the baton of a Marshal of France, upon the Corsican upstart. Bonaparte accepts the honour with a deep, respectful bow. There is no hint of defiance, no flicker of republican sentiment. He has risen to the very top of his world, not by overthrowing it, but by mastering its rules. He is fiercely loyal to the king and the army that have given him his career and his glory. His ambition is now channeled into the service of the French crown. He will spend the rest of his career as the most feared and respected military commander in Europe, the enforcer of Bourbon foreign policy. He will lead French armies in future conflicts, winning new territories for his king in Italy and along the Rhine. He will be a legend, but a royalist legend. The consequences of this are immense. Europe is spared the Napoleonic Wars, the 2 decades of continent-wide devastation that, in our timeline, shattered the old order forever. The Holy Roman Empire is not dissolved. The map of Germany remains a patchwork of small states. Spain is not invaded, its empire not thrown into the chaos that would birth the Latin American revolutions. The concept of total war, of a nation in arms fueled by patriotic fervour, is never born. Warfare remains the sport of kings, a violent but limited affair between professional armies, not a cataclysmic struggle between peoples. The great divergence has now reshaped the destiny of Europe's most transformative figure. Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who in our world was the product and then the master of a revolution, is now the ultimate symbol of the ancient regime's durability. He is its most formidable soldier, its most brilliant champion. His genius has been co-opted by the very system he would have destroyed, and in doing so has made that system stronger and more resilient than ever. The age of kings will continue, protected by the sword of the man who could have been an emperor. You are standing on a dock in Liverpool in the 1820s. The air is grey, thick with the coal smoke that billows from the forests of chimneys rising from the city. This is the engine room of a new world, a world being built not by armies and kings, but by looms and ledgers. The Industrial Revolution, which in our timeline was a chaotic and disruptive force, is here a far more orderly, centralized, and powerful phenomenon. It is the beating heart of the integrated imperial economy, a single transatlantic system of production and profit perfected by the new global order. You watch as a ship, a sleek new clipper flying the Grand Union flag, is unloaded. Its hold is packed to the gunwales with huge, tightly packed bales of raw cotton. You can smell the faint, earthy scent of the American South. This is the fuel for the inferno of the mills. This cotton was grown in Georgia, harvested by the hands of enslaved Africans, packed in Savannah, and shipped across the ocean in a British vessel. In a few days, it will be spun into thread in a Manchester mill, woven into cloth, and then shipped back out to the far corners of the British Empire, to India, to the Caribbean, and even back to the Dominion of North America as finished textiles. This is the loom and the lash, the two inseparable halves of a single, immensely profitable machine. One cannot exist without the other. Without the slave plantations of the southern Dominion provinces, the mills of Lancashire would fall silent. Without the insatiable demand of those mills, the planter aristocracy of the South would lose its source of immense wealth. It is a closed, perfect, and monstrously efficient circuit. In our timeline, the rise of industrial capitalism in the northern United States created a powerful economic and ideological rival to the slave-based South, leading to an inevitable and bloody conflict. But here, there is no such rivalry. The Dominion of North America has no independent industrial base to speak of. The Articles of Dominion and subsequent imperial trade laws have been carefully designed to prevent that. The Dominion is to be a producer of raw materials and a market for British manufactured goods. It is a classic mercantile relationship, now supercharged by the power of industry. You travel to Charleston, South Carolina. The city is a picture of aristocratic elegance and brutal efficiency. The planters you meet are not a besieged, defensive class. They are confident, powerful, and fabulously wealthy. They are titans of the new imperial economy, partners in the great transatlantic enterprise. They see themselves not as provincial farmers, but as global capitalists. They sit on the boards of shipping companies based in London and textile mills in Manchester. They have seats in the Dominion Parliament in Philadelphia, and some of the wealthiest families have even purchased peerages, giving them a voice in the House of Lords in Westminster itself. The institution of slavery, far from being a backwards, dying system, is more entrenched and scientifically managed than ever. The abolitionist movement that gained so much traction in Britain in our timeline has been neutered. Its moral arguments founder on the rocks of economic reality. To call for the abolition of slavery is to call for the shutdown of the Manchester mills, for the bankruptcy of Liverpool shipping lines, for the collapse of the entire imperial textile trade. The political will is simply not there. Instead, the system is justified in new, modern terms. It is not a necessary evil. It is a vital component of imperial prosperity, a matter of sound economic management. Pro-slavery ideologues in the South publish pamphlets, praised in the London papers, that speak of a divinely ordained hierarchical order, with the British aristocrat, the American planter, and the African slave all playing their proper, productive roles. You see the consequences for the enslaved. Any hope that the mother country might intervene on their behalf has vanished. The Crown is not their potential liberator. It is the ultimate guarantor of their bondage. Slave patrols are better equipped, often supplemented by Dominion militia units. The internal slave trade, the forced migration of people from the tired soils of Virginia to the booming cotton lands of the Mississippi Delta, is a vast and ruthlessly managed enterprise, financed by banks in London and Philadelphia. There are sporadic, desperate rebellions, but they are crushed with overwhelming force. The etheric web of the telegraph is still decades away, but even now, communication is efficient enough that no revolt can gather momentum before Imperial and Dominion forces descend upon it. This integrated economy creates a new, unified ruling class. You attend a dinner party in a London townhouse. At the table sits a British duke whose family owns a dozen textile mills, a member of the Dominion Parliament from Georgia, whose family owns 5,000 slaves, and a London banker who finances the entire operation. They speak the same language of profits, shares, and global markets. Their interests are not just aligned, they are one and the same. They are the masters of a single, cohesive economic empire, bound together by the profits generated by the Loom in Manchester and the Lash in Mississippi. The moral contradictions that would tear another version of America apart are here resolved in favor of a brutal, unassailable, and immensely powerful economic logic. You travel south to the vast, sun-scorched landscapes of Spanish America. The year is 1832. In our timeline, this was an age of new republics, a generation of Libertadores Bolivar, San Martin, O'Higgins, inspired by the examples of the United States and revolutionary France, had shattered the Spanish Empire, leaving a continent of young, volatile, independent nations in its wake. But in this world, the winds of revolution never blew south. The spark that should have lit the flame was extinguished before it could ever spread. You stand on the high plains near Ayacucho in Peru. This was the site of the final, decisive battle that sealed the independence of South America in our history. Here, you see a very different scene. You witness a Spanish royalist army, disciplined and well-equipped, conducting drills under a brilliant Sunday. Their uniforms are immaculate, their rifles are modern British-made Baker rifles, and their officers, a mix of Spanish grandees and Creole aristocrats, exude an air of unshakable confidence. The rebellion has been crushed. The Silver Empire endures. The great divergence in North America and Europe was the death knell for the independence movements of the South. As Bedrock Truth 4 dictates, the very concept of revolution has been discredited. The Creole elites of Mexico City, Lima, and Bogota looked at the American rebellion and saw not an inspiring success, but a bloody failure that ended in a negotiated return to the imperial fold. They looked at France and saw not a glorious republic of citizens, but a stable, reformed monarchy. The ideological ammunition for revolution was never supplied. Figures like Simón Bolívar exist in this timeline, but their fates are tragically altered. You see a portrait of him in a dusty government office in Caracas. In this world, Bolívar was a passionate, brilliant advocate for Creole rights, but he was a reformer, not a revolutionary. He petitioned the Spanish crown for greater autonomy, for free trade, and for more local control, using the Dominion of North America as his model. When his petitions were ignored by a stubborn Spanish court, he led a short-lived, poorly supported uprising, lacking the unifying cry of republicanism, and with no foreign allies to turn to, his movement was isolated and destroyed. He was captured and executed in 1824, a martyr to a lost cause, a cautionary tale against challenging the crown. The Spanish Empire, while internally weak and administratively archaic, has been propped up by its old rival, Great Britain. You are in the port of Veracruz, Mexico. You see British merchant ships in the harbour, but you also see a formidable Royal Navy frigate, its cannons a stark reminder of who truly controls these seas. London's policy is clear. Stability is paramount. A stable, intact Spanish Empire, however inefficient, is a predictable and profitable trading partner. A continent of warring, unstable republics is not. Therefore, British policy has been to actively support the Spanish crown against its colonial rebels. You learn of the London Accords, a treaty in which Britain provided massive loans to the Spanish treasury, specifically earmarked for the pacification of the American provinces. British arms manufacturers sold tens of thousands of rifles to the Royalist armies. The Royal Navy provided crucial intelligence and blockaded ports to prevent aid from reaching the few scattered rebel factions. For Britain, this is a masterful stroke of realpolitik. It keeps the vast markets of Spanish America open to British goods, prevents the rise of any potential rival nations, and indebts the Spanish crown to the bankers of London, making it a junior partner in Britain's growing global imperium. You observe the consequences of this enduring colonial rule. The rigid hierarchical social structure of the Spanish colonies remains locked in place. The casta system, with its labyrinthine classifications of race and blood, is not dismantled. The immense power of the land-owning Creole aristocracy and the Catholic Church is unbroken. There is no great wave of 19th-century immigration from Europe. No burst of liberal constitutionalism. Spanish America remains a slow-moving, deeply conservative, and agrarian society. Economic development is stunted, or rather, channeled exclusively for the benefit of the imperial powers. Mines in Peru and Mexico continue to pour silver into the world, but the profits flow to Madrid and London. The continent's role is the same as that of the North American Dominion, to provide raw materials for the workshops of the world, which are all located in Great Britain. As you journey through this preserved colonial world, you feel a profound sense of stasis. The continent is at peace, but it is the peace of stagnation. The revolutionary fires that forged the dynamic, chaotic, and often violent nations of Latin America, in our timeline, were never lit. The Silver Empire, creaking and antiquated, has been preserved in amber by the cold, calculating logic of British imperial policy. The Great Divergence has not only prevented the birth of one republic, the United States, but has now ensured that a score of others will also never see the light of day. The future of an entire hemisphere has been reshaped. You return to London, the undisputed centre of this ever-expanding world. The year is 1851. The city is a marvel of power and wealth, a sprawling metropolis of iron, steam, and money. This year marks a pivotal moment, a celebration of British global supremacy. The Great Exhibition. In our history, this was a showcase of international industry. Here, it is something more. It is an exclusively imperial affair, a grand demonstration of the products, resources, and fealty of a planet-spanning empire. Inside the Crystal Palace, the colossal structure of glass and iron built in Hyde Park, you walk through halls dedicated to the various territories of the Crown. You see the fine wools of Australia, the exotic hardwoods of India, the sugar of the West Indies, and, in the largest and most prominent exhibit of all, the vast agricultural and mineral wealth of the Dominion of North America. There are mountains of cotton bales from the south, barrels of grain from the mid-Atlantic provinces, and displays of timber and furs from the north. It is a physical manifestation of the integrated economy you saw taking shape 30 years ago. This exhibition is the backdrop for the most significant constitutional development in the empire since the Articles of Dominion. The world has grown smaller and more interconnected. The steamship and the telegraph, still in its infancy but rapidly expanding, have made it possible to govern a global empire with a degree of centralization that would have been unimaginable to a Roman emperor. The old ad hoc system of colonial governors, chartered companies, and disparate dominions is no longer sufficient. The masters of the empire in London, men of immense foresight and ambition, see the need for a new, unified political structure. You are in the gallery of the House of Commons at Westminster. Prime Minister Robert Peel, a figure who in our timeline is known for his domestic reforms, is here the architect of a new imperial constitution. He rises to introduce the Act of Imperial Representation. It is a landmark piece of legislation, the logical endpoint of the path taken since the reconciliation with America. The Act does not create a federal system of equals. It reaffirms the absolute sovereignty of the King in Parliament at Westminster. But it makes a radical concession. For the first time, it grants a limited number of seats in the House of Commons to representatives from the Crown's most important settler territories. The Dominion of North America is granted 20 seats. The fledgling colonies in Australia are granted 5. New Zealand gets 2. Even British India, still largely ruled through the East India Company, but with growing Crown oversight, is granted 3 seats for its most prominent Anglo-Indian merchants. You observe the debate. There is opposition, of course. Old Tory squires grumble about colonials and foreigners, polluting the ancient purity of Westminster. But the logic of the bill, championed by Peel and the industrial and mercantile interests, is overwhelming. They argue that the immense wealth and power of territories like North America demand that their elites be bound more tightly to the imperial centre. Granting them a small voice in London is not a dilution of British power, but a concentration of it. It is a way to co-opt and control the colonial aristocracies, to make them feel a part of the imperial project, to prevent the kind of alienation that led to the rebellion of 1776. The American Dominion delegates who will take these seats are not fiery revolutionaries. You see them arriving in London. They are men like the great planters from Carolina, industrialists from Pennsylvania, and shipping magnates from New England. They are the transatlantic capitalists you saw emerging decades ago, now given a formal place at the heart of the empire. Their presence in London is a symbol of their loyalty and their importance. They will have little real power to swing a vote on their own, but they will have access, influence, and the ear of the men who run the world. They will lobby for favourable trade policies, for imperial investment in Dominion canals and railways, and for the security of their property and institutions. This Grand Imperial Parliament is a revolutionary step in the history of governance. It is the central nervous system of a single, global political entity. A decision made in a London committee room can now be implemented via steamship and telegraph in Philadelphia, Sydney, or Calcutta within weeks. The world has never seen a state of this scale or complexity. It is the fulfillment of bedrock truth 3. The British Empire has become the sole, hyper-dominant global power, not just militarily and economically, but now constitutionally as well. However, you notice the deep, inherent imbalance of the system. While the 20 American delegates take their seats, the hundreds of millions of people in India and Africa have virtually no voice. The system is designed to manage the empire's white settler colonies, not to enfranchise its vast non-white subject populations. Furthermore, the 20 American seats are a pittance relative to the Dominion's growing population and economic might. For now, it is a symbol of inclusion that satisfies the colonial elites, but it also creates a new yardstick by which they will measure their status. What happens when 20 seats no longer seem like enough? For now, in the glittering spectacle of 1851, these are distant concerns. The act of imperial representation is hailed as a triumph of enlightened statecraft. It has bound the empire together, with constitutional chains, creating a single, London-centric imperium. The Great Divergence has led not to a world of many independent nations, but to a world united under a single, globe-spanning crown. The year is 1860. You stand in the dry, golden hills of a landscape that feels suspended in time. Dust devils dance in the distance, and the sun beats down with an unforgiving intensity. This is the northern frontier of the Spanish Empire, a land of sprawling cattle ranches, isolated Catholic missions, and a few dusty presidios. It is a world that has changed little in a century. But a new power is about to arrive, a force of modernity and ambition that will shatter the long colonial siesta. This land is called Alta California. The pressure that you saw building along the Appalachian Wall decades ago has found a new outlet. While direct westward expansion into the Ohio country remains blocked, the dominion of North America has grown in other ways. Its population has swelled, and its economic engine, tied to Britain, has become immensely powerful. The restless, expansionist spirit of its people has not vanished. It has been redirected. Instead of pushing west into the protected Indian Reserve, the Dominion's gaze has turned southwest, toward the vast, sparsely populated, and poorly administered territories of the decaying Spanish Empire. You are with a column of soldiers marching through a mountain pass. But this is not a rabble of frontier squatters. This is a disciplined, professional military force. At its core are 2 regiments of British regulars. Their red coats, a stark slash of colour against the brown landscape. Marching beside them are 5 regiments of the Dominion Legion, soldiers of the North American Parliament, wearing blue coats but marching under the same Grand Union flag. They are armed with the latest Enfield rifled muskets, and their supply train is a model of British logistical efficiency. This is the Imperial Fist, and it is coming to claim new lands for the Crown. The casus belli is a flimsy one, a dispute over land grants in the territory of Tejas, where Anglo-American settlers, invited in by a weak Mexican administration decades ago, now outnumber the local Tejanos. But no one is fooled. This is a simple, naked power grab, an expression of the dominions and the empire's growing might. The Spanish Empire, which you saw propped up by Britain 30 years ago, is now the target of that same British power. London's calculations have changed. Supporting a weak but stable Spain was useful, but taking its most valuable and underused northern territories for the Crown is now seen as more profitable. You witness the conquest of California and Nuevo Mexico. It is less a war and more a swift, surgical occupation. The Spanish garrisons are small, isolated, and demoralized. The Royal Navy sails into the magnificent harbour of Yerba Buena, what would have been San Francisco, and lands Marines without a single shot being fired. The main military column marches into the Pueblo of Los Angeles and the ancient city of Santa Fe, accepting the surrender of the local Spanish governors. There are a few brief, heroic, but futile skirmishes, but the outcome is never in doubt. The speed and efficiency of the operation are a testament to the new imperial system. The decision was made in London, in the Grand Imperial Parliament, with the full-throated support of the North American delegates who see this as a glorious expansion of their own domain. The orders were transmitted to the Governor-General in Philadelphia, and a combined force of British and Dominion troops was mobilized. It is a perfectly coordinated act of imperial aggression. You observe the aftermath of the annexation. The old Spanish and Creole elites are, for the most part, co-opted. Their vast landholdings are confirmed by the new British administration in exchange for oaths of loyalty to the Crown. The Catholic Church is guaranteed its rights and properties. For the powerful, it is simply a change of flags. For the ordinary people, the mestizo ranchers and the indigenous peoples, life continues much as it did before, only now the distant ruler is a British queen instead of a Spanish king. The real change is the influx of people and capital that follows the flag. Yerba Buena is renamed Port Victoria and is immediately designated as the primary Pacific naval base for the British Empire. Its harbour begins to fill with ships from London, Boston, and Sydney. Anglo-American settlers, the same kind of people who once chafed against the Appalachian Wall, now pour into the fertile valleys of California, establishing farms and towns. Geologists in the pay of London banks arrive and begin surveying the Sierra Nevada mountains. Having heard rumors of gold, the annexation of California and Nuevo Mexico transforms the geopolitical map of the continent. The Dominion of North America is now a coast-to-coast entity, albeit with the vast forbidden Indian Reserve still occupying its center. More importantly, the British Empire is now a major Pacific power in the Americas. This is a direct challenge to the other great power, expanding across the globe from the west, the Russian Empire. The Russians have holdings in Alaska and have been pushing their own fur trading outposts down the coast. The acquisition of California by the British creates a new, immense frontier of friction. The long-standing rivalry between the Russian bear and the British lion, the great game, which in our world was played out on the desolate steppes of Central Asia, is now poised to find a new theatre on the shores of the Pacific Ocean. The conquest of a sleepy Spanish territory has set the stage for a future clash of empires. The world of the 1870s is a world knit together by steam and steel. It is a planet under the thumb of empire, a place where the old frictions of geography are being systematically erased by British technology and ambition. You find yourself in this new Pacific theatre, a cold, fog-shrouded coastline of towering forests and icy blue water. This is the new front line of global power politics, a place where the eastward sprawl of the Russian Empire grinds against the westward surge of the British. You stand on the deck of HMS Warrior, the pride of the Royal Navy's Pacific Squadron. She is a black-hulled monster of iron and steam, the most powerful warship on the planet. Her guns can level a city, and her engines can carry her across the vast ocean without a breath of wind. She is the physical embodiment of the British Empire's technological and industrial supremacy. The ship is at anchor in the harbour of Port Victoria, the bustling windswept city that was once the Spanish village of Yerba Buena. The harbour is now a forest of masts, a nexus of trade routes, connecting this new coast to Australia, to China, and to London. The reason for this naval presence becomes clear as you look at a map in the captain's cabin. The map shows the coastline stretching north, past the Oregon country, a territory jointly administered by Britain and Russia, in an uneasy truce. Further north still is Russian America, what we would call Alaska. For decades, the Russian-American company has been pushing south from its capital at Novo-Arkhangelsk, establishing trading posts and small forts. Their goal was the lucrative sea otter fur trade. But now, with the British firmly entrenched in California, every Russian move is seen as a potential threat. The great rivalry between the two empires, the Great Game, is played out here not by spies in dusty bazaars, but by naval patrols, diplomatic maneuvering, and competing survey teams. You travel north, to a small Russian outpost at Fort Ross, just north of Port Victoria. It is a lonely place of rough-hewn Orthodox chapels and weathered wooden stockades. The Russian settlers and traders are hardy folk, but they are isolated, at the very end of a supply line that stretches across the entirety of Siberia. They look south at the booming, aggressive British presence in California with a deep and abiding anxiety. You are present for a moment of high tension. A British survey ship, ostensibly charting the coastline, sails into Bodega Bay, a harbour claimed by the Russians. It is met by a Russian gunboat. Cannons are loaded. For a few tense hours, the two colossal empires are on the brink of open conflict over a few miles of foggy, unsettled coastline. The incident is eventually diffused by diplomats half a world away in St. Petersburg and London. But the message is clear. The Pacific Northwest is the new powder keg of the world. This rivalry is driven by more than just territory. It is a clash of two different models of empire. The British Empire is a maritime and commercial entity, a global network of trade and finance, protected by a high-tech navy. The Russian Empire is a terrestrial and autocratic power, a vast, contiguous landmass, ruled by the absolute will of the Tsar, expanding through the slow, inexorable movement of settlers and soldiers across the steppes. You travel to the court of the Empress of India and Queen of Great Britain Victoria in London. Then you travel to the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, to the court of the Tsar of all the Russias, Alexander II. The contrast is stark. London is the hub of a decentralized, parliamentary empire of global capitalists. St. Petersburg is the center of a highly centralized, bureaucratic empire of absolute autocrats. Yet, they are the only two powers on Earth with a truly global reach. They see each other as the only conceivable rival, the only other piece on the chessboard that matters. The Tsar and the Empress become the personal symbols of this global standoff. Their diplomats and ministers engage in a constant, intricate dance of threats and negotiations. The focus of this dance is the Pacific. Britain reinforces its garrison in Port Victoria and begins construction of a naval base in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Russia sends more settlers and warships to Novo-Archangelsk. The native peoples of the region are caught in the middle, forced to choose sides, their lands becoming the pawns in this imperial game. This Pacific Great Game has a profound effect on the rest of the world. With Britain's strategic attention and military resources increasingly focused on containing Russia in the Pacific, its grip on other parts of the world must be adjusted. The old rivalries in Europe are seen as a distraction. Policy in London becomes increasingly isolationist with regard to the continent, focused on maintaining a simple balance of power that will not interfere with the primary global struggle against the Tsar. The destiny of Germany, of France, of Austria, all of it is now secondary to the great cold conflict being waged across the vast expanse of the northern Pacific Ocean. The annexation of California did not just add a new territory to the British Empire, it locked the world into a bipolar struggle for dominance, a 19th century Cold War between the whale and the elephant. You are in Berlin, the capital of a new and formidable power. The year is 1888. This city, once the provincial seat of the kings of Prussia, is now the heart of a unified German empire, gleaming new ministries and monuments in the heavy, imposing style of the Grandezite line. The avenues. The air hums with the energy of a nation that has arrived, a people who have forged a unified state through diplomacy and the sharp edge of the Prussian army. But the world this new Germany has been born into is not the one we know. It is a planet already owned and operated by other, older powers. At the center of this new Berlin, you find the architect of German unification, the aging but still brilliant Chancellor, Otto von Bismarck. He is a man of supreme realism, a master of the complex chessboard of European politics. In our timeline, Bismarck hosted the Berlin Conference of 1884 to carve up Africa amongst the European powers, a frantic scramble for the last unclaimed parts of the globe. Here, his ambitions are necessarily different. There is no scramble for Africa. Africa, like most of the world, is already under the thumb of the British Empire, a patchwork of protectorates, client states, and coastal trading posts managed from London. The conference Bismarck hosts in 1888 is a far more sombre and pragmatic affair. It is called the Berlin Summit on Global Order. He has not invited the minor powers of Europe. He has invited the three empires that truly matter: the globe, spanning British, the vast Russian, and the ancient but still significant Spanish and French empires who attend as junior partners. You are a fly on the wall in the Grand Hall of the Reich Chancellery. The mood is not one of competitive carving. It is one of formal, grudging recognition of a settled reality. Bismarck's goal is not to challenge the existing world order, but to find a secure place for Germany within it. He knows that Germany, despite its military prowess in Europe, cannot hope to challenge the British Royal Navy or the sheer mass of the Russian army in a global conflict. A colonial empire on the scale of Britain's is an impossible dream. Instead, he seeks to enshrine the status quo in a formal treaty to get the great powers to acknowledge Germany's dominance in Central Europe in exchange for Germany acknowledging their dominance over the rest of the planet. You watch as the delegates, the elderly Lord Salisbury for Britain and the shrewd Nikolai Gers for Russia, lay out their spheres of influence on a massive globe in the center of the room. It is a stark visualization of the state of the world. The British delegate's hand sweeps across all of North America, Australia, India, and nearly all of Africa. The Russian's hand covers a vast swathe of Asia, from the Pacific to the borders of Persia. The French and Spanish delegates point to their preserved but static domains in North Africa and South America, respectively. The Spheres of Global Order treaty that emerges from the summit is a landmark document. It is the formal constitution of a planet ruled by a handful of empires. It recognizes British hegemony over the world's oceans and most of its continents. It recognizes Russia's terrestrial empire in Asia and its claims in the far north of America. And, crucially for Bismarck, it recognizes Central Europe as Germany's sphere of influence, a zone where it can exert its economic and political power without interference from London or St. Petersburg. Germany, in effect, trades a colonial future for a European one. Bismarck's strategy is to create Mitteleuropa, a German-dominated economic and political bloc in the heart of the continent. German industry, which is growing at a prodigious rate, will not compete with Britain for global markets. Instead, it will focus on the captive markets of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Balkans, and the Ottoman Empire. Germany will build railways to Baghdad, not to Cape Town. It will become a great continental power, a hegemon in its own backyard. But it will never become a true world power. It has been locked out of the global game. This has profound consequences for the German national psyche. The frustration of being a latecomer, the sense of being denied a place in the sun, is channeled inward. German culture and politics become more insular, more focused on the European continent. The navy remains a secondary force, designed to protect the Baltic coast, not to challenge Britain on the high seas. The Berlin summit is the high-water mark of the 19th century imperial system. It is an attempt to freeze history, to lock the planet into a stable, predictable order, managed by a concert of empires. As Bedrock Truth 3 is fully realized, the hyper-dominant British Empire now has its position formally acknowledged by its only potential rivals. The summit avoids a future global war by dividing the world in advance. But it also creates a world of cages. Germany is caged within Europe. Russia is caged within its vast landmass. And the entire world is caged within a system that leaves no room for new nations, new powers, or revolutionary ideas to emerge. The peace it creates is the peace of a prison yard, stable and orderly, but without the hope of fundamental change. You are in a darkened room, cool and quiet, shielded from the London fog outside. The only sounds are the rhythmic, metallic clicking of dozens of telegraph keys and the rustle of paper. This is the nerve center of the world, the central node of the Imperial telegraph network. It is 1905. The walls are covered with massive maps, crisscrossed by red lines that snake across continents and dive beneath the dark blue of the oceans. Each red line represents a submarine telegraph cable, a strand of copper and gutta percha that binds the planet to this single room. This is the Aetheric Web, the technological marvel that has perfected the art of centralized imperial rule. You watch a clerk, a young man with a green visor and ink-stained fingers, tap out a message. His key clicks and chatters, translating the Queen's English into the universal language of Morse code. The electrical impulses travel down a wire, out of the building, across England, and to a cliffside station in Cornwall. There, they dive into the Atlantic, racing along the transatlantic cable that lands in Halifax, Nova Scotia. From there, the message is relayed across the Dominion of North America, over the Rocky Mountains, to the naval headquarters at Port Victoria, California. The message contains a series of coded instructions regarding the deployment of the Pacific Squadron in response to a suspected Russian maneuver in the Kuril Islands. An order conceived in London just minutes ago is now being decoded and acted upon by an admiral 10,000 miles away. The governor of a province in India can receive a directive from the Colonial Office in the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. A bank in Sydney, Australia, can get the latest interest rates from the Bank of England almost instantaneously. This is the ultimate realization of the centralized state that was first envisioned in the Act of Imperial Representation. The Grand Imperial Parliament is no longer just a political body. It is the brain of a global organism, and the Aetheric Web is its nervous system. This network has transformed governance from a slow, reactive process based on month-old letters into a dynamic, proactive system of near real-time control. The construction of this network was a monumental undertaking, the great imperial project of the late 19th century. British ships, great cable layers, steamed across every ocean, spooling out millions of miles of cable. It was an expression of supreme industrial and financial power. No other nation could even dream of building such a system. The network is exclusively British-owned and operated. All messages, even those between other nations, must pass through British-controlled hubs. It is the ultimate tool of surveillance and control. London not only commands its own empire with unprecedented speed, it also, in a very real sense, reads the mail of the entire world. You see the effect this has on the administration of the empire. The old figure of the semi-independent colonial governor, the man on the spot who had to make decisions based on his own judgment, is gone. The viceroys and governors in Philadelphia, Calcutta, and Cape Town are now essentially regional managers, executing directives from London. Policy is uniform, centralized, and absolute. This system is brutally efficient in maintaining order. You are taken to a military monitoring station in the Appalachian region of the North American Dominion. Decades of simmering resentment among the trapped frontier population have recently coalesced into a political movement demanding the opening of the Ohio Indian Reserve for settlement. The movement's leaders organize a Great March on the Dominion Parliament in Philadelphia. In a previous era, such a movement might have gathered momentum for weeks before the authorities could react. Now, you watch as telegraph operators receive reports from local agents, tracking the march's progress mile by mile. These reports are relayed to Philadelphia and London. Before the march has even covered 50 miles, orders are sent out from the Dominion capital. Regiments of the Dominion Legion are dispatched by railway to intercept the marchers at a key river crossing. The leaders of the movement are identified, and warrants for their arrest are telegraphed ahead to their hometowns. The protest is decapitated and dispersed before it can even become a threat. The Aetheric Web is not just a tool for communication, it is a weapon for preemptive social control. The world of 1905 is a world without secrets, at least from the perspective of London. The great, slow, ponderous inertia of history, the drag of distance and time that allowed for revolutions and rebellions to fester in isolation, has been conquered. The empire is a single, interconnected machine, managed with breathtaking efficiency from its London core. Bedrock truth, 3 British hyperdominance, is no longer just a matter of military and economic power. It is now a matter of informational supremacy. The empire knows everything, and it can react instantly. It has become a thinking, feeling entity, its copper nerves wrapped around the globe, ensuring that the Pax Britannica is not just a slogan, but a permanent, technologically enforced reality. You are in the grimy, smoke-choked heart of the industrial beast. The year is 1919. You stand in the docklands of London, then in the textile mills of Manchester, then in the steel foundries of Pittsburgh, a city in the North American Dominion. The locations are thousands of miles apart, but the scenes are eerily identical. Towering brick factories, skies permanently grey with coal dust, and the endless, deafening roar of machinery. And everywhere, you see the faces of the men and women who serve these machines, pale, exhausted, and etched with a new kind of consciousness. For a century, the masters of the British Empire have perfected a system of global control over territories and resources. They have managed kings and parliaments, ships and armies. But they have overlooked the one force that their system has unintentionally created and unified: an international industrial working class. The Aetheric Web, the telegraphic nervous system designed to control the empire, has had an unforeseen side effect. The workers who operate it, the miners who dig the coal for its steam engines, the factory hands who produce its goods, they have all begun to realize they are part of the same global machine. A new ideology has been spreading through this global proletariat, not in pamphlets passed in secret, but in coded messages tapped out on the telegraph itself, in conversations between sailors in the ports of Liverpool and Philadelphia, and in newspapers published for working-class immigrants. It is not republicanism, which is dismissed as a failed bourgeois idea. It is not nationalism, for these workers feel more kinship with a fellow miner across the ocean than with the aristocrat who owns their factory. It is syndicalism. The core idea is simple and powerful. The workers, the producers of all wealth, should control the means of production, the factories, the mines, the railways. Their organizing principle is not the political party, but the industrial union, the syndicate. Their ultimate goal is not to seize the state, but to make it irrelevant by taking direct, democratic control of the entire economy through a coordinated, general strike. In this timeline, without the disruptive force of the world wars and the rise of communism in Russia, syndicalism has become the dominant radical ideology on the planet. Its major intellectual hub is not Moscow, but Chicago, a city at the heart of the dominion of North America's industrial belt, a violent, dynamic crucible of immigrant labor and brutal working conditions. You are in a hidden meeting hall in Chicago. The air is thick with pipe smoke, and the accents of a dozen different languages: German, Polish, Italian, Irish. You see the leaders of the International Workers Syndicate, IWS, planning their great move. They are not wild-eyed anarchists. They are shrewd, capable organizers. They have used the empire's own technology against it. For years, they have been secretly mapping the critical nodes of the imperial economy: the key ports, the major railway junctions, the transatlantic cable stations. Their plan is audacious: to paralyze the entire Anglo-American industrial heartland in a single, coordinated blow. The moment comes on May 1st, 1919. You are in Trafalgar Square in London. A telegraph message arrives at the Admiralty, but it is not a naval order. It is a simple, 5-word sentence sent from the IWS headquarters in Chicago: the great work has begun. At that exact moment, the world grinds to a halt. In the port of London, the crane operators and stevedores walk off the job, leaving hundreds of ships stranded, unable to unload their cargo. In Manchester, the mill workers shut down their looms. The silence in the factory halls, sudden and terrifying. In the coalfields of Wales and Pennsylvania, the miners lay down their picks. The telegraph operators, the very neurons of the Aetheric Web, begin to send out syndicate propaganda while refusing to transmit government and military orders. The effect is catastrophic. The integrated imperial economy, the Loom and the Lash, so ruthlessly efficient in its operation, is also incredibly fragile. Its reliance on a constant, uninterrupted flow of goods and information is its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. Within days, cities begin to face food shortages. Factories run out of raw materials. The stock markets in London and Philadelphia go into freefall. The imperial government is stunned. This is a threat they never anticipated. It is not an army they can fight, nor a colony they can pacify. It is a ghost in their own machine. They declare the strike an act of insurrection and send in the army. You witness brutal scenes in Pittsburgh as Dominion legionnaires open fire on striking steelworkers. In Glasgow, there are street battles between soldiers and shipyard workers. But the syndicate is prepared. They are not trying to win a military victory. They are waging economic warfare. For every striker shot, 10 more walk off the job in solidarity. The violence only hardens their resolve and wins them public sympathy. For the first time, the masters of the world, the transatlantic capitalists and the imperial administrators, feel a genuine sense of fear. Their perfect, orderly, centrally controlled world is coming apart from the inside. This is the great, unforeseen consequence of the global system they built. By creating a single, planet-spanning factory, they have also created a single, planet-spanning workforce. The syndicalist threat is the logical endpoint of the great divergence, an ideological challenge born directly from the structure of the hyper-dominant, industrialized British Empire. The revolution that was suppressed in 1776 has returned in a new, more potent, and far more dangerous form. The world of the 1930s is a world scarred and transformed by the great upheaval of 1919. The general strike was eventually broken, but only after years of brutal suppression, economic chaos, and a partial collapse of the imperial industrial system. The cost was astronomical. A generation's faith in the permanence and benevolence of the imperial order was shattered. The syndicalist movement, though driven underground, remains a potent and ever-present ideological threat, a ghost that haunts the masters of the empire. In response, the empire has turned inward, becoming a more paranoid, more controlled, and more technologically sophisticated version of its former self. You are in a place that is both a laboratory and a temple to this new era of control. You are at the Babbage Institute, a sprawling government-funded complex in the quiet countryside outside Cambridge. Here, the legacy of the 19th century mathematician Charles Babbage, a brilliant but eccentric figure who, in our timeline, died with his dreams of mechanical computers unrealized, has been brought to fruition on a colossal scale. Faced with the syndicalist threat of an unreliable and rebellious human workforce, the imperial government has poured vast resources into a single, overarching goal: the automation of order. They seek to build an industrial and administrative system that is less dependent on human hands, and therefore immune to the threat of a general strike. You walk through a cavernous hall filled with what are called analytical engines. These are not electronic computers. The vacuum tube has not yet been invented. They are immense mechanical computers, intricate cities of brass and steel gears, clicking and whirring in a deafening rhythmic symphony. Each engine is the size of a locomotive, powered by a dedicated steam engine in the basement below. Punched cards, the descendants of the Jacquard loom, are fed into them in steady streams, providing both data and instructions. These engines are the new brains of the empire. One engine is tasked with optimizing shipping schedules for the entire Atlantic fleet, routing vessels to minimize labor costs and maximize fuel efficiency, far faster than any team of human clerks. Another is a massive statistical engine, cross-referencing census data, factory outputs, and reports from police informants to create threat assessments, identifying potential labor unrest hotspots before they can even erupt. This is the Aetheric Web of the last generation, now augmented with a primitive, mechanical, artificial intelligence. The most profound impact, however, is in the factories themselves. You travel to a newly built automotive works outside Detroit, in the North American Dominion. The assembly line is a terrifying marvel of automation. You see engine blocks and chassis moving along on conveyor belts, but the workers are few and far between. Huge, steam-powered mechanical arms, their movements dictated by a punched card program, swing heavy components into place. Rivets are hammered by automated trip hammers. The few human workers you see are not skilled artisans. They are tenders. Their sole job to watch the machines, to oil them, to clear jams. They are servants to the automated process, easily trained and easily replaced. This is the Empire's ultimate answer to the Syndicalist threat. By replacing skilled, organized workers with machines, they have broken the power of the trade unions. A general strike in a factory like this is impossible. There are simply not enough essential workers to make it effective. The Empire is deliberately de-skilling its own workforce, trading the productivity of human ingenuity for the reliability of mechanical obedience. This technological solution creates a new and deeply troubling social order. You walk through the worker districts of Detroit. There is no mass unemployment, not yet. But there is a pervasive sense of uselessness. The old pride of the skilled craftsman is gone, replaced by the quiet desperation of the machine tender. Wages are stagnant, kept low by the fact that workers are now interchangeable parts in a vast machine. Social mobility has ground to a halt. Meanwhile, a new elite has emerged. The technocrats, the engineers, mathematicians, and programmers who design and maintain the automated systems. They are the high priests of this new mechanical order, granted immense prestige and power by the state. They live in exclusive, government-built communities, isolated from the sullen and disempowered masses. Society is re-stratifying into two distinct classes: a small, educated elite who controls the machines, and a vast, semi-skilled proletariat that serves them. The automation of order is a resounding success from the perspective of the Imperial government. Labor, unrest, plummets. Industrial productivity, after a period of adjustment, becomes more predictable and stable than ever. The threat of another great upheaval fades. But the victory has been won at a terrible price. The dynamism, the innovation, and the human spirit that drove the first century of the Industrial Revolution have been deliberately sacrificed on the altar of stability. The Empire has solved the problem of rebellion by creating a society of quiet, managed despair. It has perfected its control over the world by mechanizing the soul of its own people. You are standing on a promenade overlooking the Thames in London as the 20th century draws to a close. The sky is clear. For the first time in 200 years, the city is free of coal smoke. The air is clean, quiet, and sterile. The source of this cleanliness is the colossal atomic fission plant you can see shimmering in the distance downriver, its cooling towers emitting harmless clouds of water vapor. The Empire has mastered the atom. Not for bombs. The great ideological and nationalistic conflicts that would have spurred a nuclear arms race never occurred but for power. Clean, limitless, centrally controlled energy. It is the final perfection of the automated, ordered world. This is the silent century. It is the ultimate outcome of the great divergence, the logical endpoint of a history that chose security over liberty, order over chaos, and the predictable hum of a machine over the unpredictable passions of humanity. The world is at peace. The Pax Britannica, enforced by technological supremacy, has held for over 200 years. There have been no world wars, no genocides, no revolutions. The population is prosperous in a way that would astound their 18th century ancestors. Everyone has a home, enough food, and access to basic healthcare, all provided and managed by the vast, paternalistic bureaucracy of the imperial state. You walk the streets. They are immaculate. Automated street sweepers glide silently along the curbs. Public transport is a network of clean, efficient electric trains, their schedules managed to the microsecond by the analytical engines at the Babbage Institute. There is no crime to speak of. A dense network of public surveillance cameras and the statistical policing models run by the engines have made street crime a statistical impossibility. But you feel a profound and unnerving silence. There is no art that shocks, no music that moves the soul, no literature that challenges the foundations of society. The creative arts are state-sponsored and state-approved, producing pleasant landscapes, patriotic hymns, and historical dramas that celebrate the wisdom and foresight of the imperial system. The explosive cultural disruptions of the 20th century modernism, jazz, rock and roll, the counterculture never happened. These were the products of friction, of rebellion, of the very social and political chaos that this timeline has been so successful in eliminating. You visit a university. The curriculum is focused on engineering, mathematics, and administration, the practical skills needed to maintain the imperial machine. The humanities are treated as a quaint historical curiosity. Philosophy departments still exist, but they study the great thinkers of the past as artifacts. They do not produce new, disruptive ideas of their own. Critical theory is a diagnosis for a social disease that has been cured. You journey to the dominion of North America. The Appalachian wall still stands, a line of pristine, managed wilderness. The great chaotic westward expansion that defined the American character in our timeline is a story in a history book about a path not taken. The cities are orderly and planned. The people are polite, docile, and uninspired. The restlessness, the ambition, the sheer, noisy energy that characterized another America are absent. This is the great trade-off, the final bill for the rejection of that declaration in 1776. The men in that room chose order over the terrifying uncertainties of freedom. Their descendants have inherited the world they chose. A world where every major problem has been solved, except for one, the problem of the human spirit. The system is perfect, but it is a gilded cage. It has protected humanity from its worst impulses, war, violence, poverty, by suppressing the very impulses that also lead to greatness. Ambition, creativity, rebellion, and the desperate, often foolish, yearning to be free. The world is run by a benevolent, omniscient, and suffocatingly intelligent machine. The analytical engines manage the economy, distribute resources, and even guide political decisions based on purely logical, statistical analysis. The human members of the Grand Imperial Parliament are now largely ceremonial, approving the flawless, data-driven policies presented to them by the technocratic elite. There is no overt oppression, no jackboots on the street. There is simply the gentle, relentless, and soul-crushing pressure of a perfectly managed system. A system designed to prevent all the failures of history, and in doing so, has prevented any of its triumphs. The great divergence from our timeline is complete. It has led not to a hell, but to a comfortable, prosperous, and utterly meaningless purgatory. The silent century is the peace of the tomb. A world where the symphony of human history, with all its soaring crescendos and jarring discords, has finally, irrevocably, faded to silence. We chose the Great Divergence as our guide, and the path it carved through history has led us here to the quiet shores of the silent century. The promise of this archetype was a timeline that would continuously move further away from our own, and in this it has succeeded beyond measure. The single Quill's hesitation in 1776 was the subtle, almost imperceptible turning of a rudder that has now, 2 centuries later, brought the ship of humanity to an entirely different continent of existence. What are the trade-offs of this world? We traded the fire of revolution for the quiet warmth of a well-tended hearth. We traded the blood and chaos of the Napoleonic Wars, the American Civil War, and the 2 world wars for an unbroken, managed peace. We traded poverty, starvation, and instability for a world of universal, automated prosperity. On the ledger of human suffering, the gains are undeniable, astronomical. But the price was not paid in gold or territory. It was paid in spirit. This timeline traded the unknown for the known, freedom for security, and genius for stability. It solved the problem of human conflict by mechanizing human life. It averted the tragedies of our history by erasing the possibility of its triumphs. There is no Abraham Lincoln in this world, for there was no crisis of a nation divided. There is no Marie Curie, for the intellectual dynamism of a revolutionary Paris was replaced by the calm of a reformed monarchy. There is no Martin Luther King Jr., for the concept of a righteous struggle against an unjust state was never allowed to take root. The Great Divergence has created a perfect system for managing a species, but a terrible one for nurturing humanity. It is a gilded cage, comfortable and safe, but a cage nonetheless. This world is not a dystopia of overt cruelty, but something far more insidious, a utopia of utter meaninglessness. It poses the final, chilling question: is a perfect, painless, and predictable existence a worthy goal if the cost is the very spark of unpredictable, messy, and glorious humanity that makes the journey worthwhile in the first place?